The European Minor is upon us, run by PGL, and we have the 8 teams who are battling to get the 2 slots to represent Europe at the major qualifier. So the 8 teams we have the high seeds who were Envious, I think it was Envious and Penta, and then the medium seeds were Big, iGame, and I think was LDLC actually a medium seed, I forget. And then we have the low seeds, which are Dignitas, Fnatic Academy, and Kingwin. And as of right this moment, I don't know what the groups are going to be, but I'm going to give you a preview of the event, run down the teams, and then we're going to actually use the ESP site to enter my giveaway, which is going to be a fantasy competition for this PGL EU Minor, where you pick the players you think will do well, and then the winners, the prizes are skins, you know, filthy skins that you like. So first and foremost, I think the most interesting thing to look at is who has the best chance to get out here. So on paper, the team with the best chance is fairly obviously Envious, because Envious has done very well online recently in EPL. Admittedly in ECS they weren't doing that well, and they did pretty well at EPL finals, where they managed to finish top 6 and won a map off Team Liquid, but lost in the 5-6 match. I do think that the playoffs kind of showed that they leveled off, and the group stage was a bit of a one-off, but it was a one-off in a tough group and against top-level teams. So these are all teams much below the level there. And in terms of skill, we know they've got Scream, they've got RPK, Happy, XMS is an uprising player. So we know there's talented players in Envious. And on paper, they are the best team in this qualifier, and they are the team that should most likely make it out. But you got to look at the equation of who can beat them, like who would match up well against them. So first and foremost, in terms of who the other good teams are, right, in theory, you would think Big, Godby's team that has Nex, and it has Tabson and Kiev. Okay, in terms of skill, they should have a good enough matchup. They've had some decent results, not super good, like they were in the final of DreamHack Leipzig, but they didn't do very well at Copenhagen Games. Okay, they have some like decent players, so you'd think they, skill-wise and experience-wise, should be able to go head-to-head with Envious. I think certainly they'll be contending to get at one of the qualifier spots. You look at Penta. Penta has looked pretty good online recently. We know they've got some skill in that team. Yeah, they may have an outside shot. iGame have had the odd online upset, but I don't think it's realistic to expect, just in terms of that team, that online they're going to be outplacing Envious. LDLC, so Existence's team, that has some decent talent from the French and Belgian scene. You'd think unlikely that they're going to do it. They just haven't done enough at the lands they've been to. Dignitas, which crucially, remember, doesn't have Makalele and Peter. They got in Tensky and Croman. Actually, they've had a little bit of a heater online with some online matches, but map pool seems a bit too narrow for them. They seem like they're a bit of an outside chance to even get out. Fnatic Academy hasn't been absolutely terrible, but they have had a lot of online losses, and you'd think they just don't really have the pedigree to get out of this kind of tournament. And then Kingwin have actually been terrible in all respects. They did really badly in EPL, and they've just looked quite bad, and their map pool is non-existent. So in theory, realistically, it's only really Big and Penta who should be contending with Envious with an outside chance for LDLC. But you've got to also look at how they match up. Like, who can actually match up map pool-wise with the guys from Envious? Because the interesting thing about Envious is their top 3 maps at the moment are Cobble, Train, and Nuke. Like, these are the maps where really they want to get to them and they want to play these maps. Obviously interesting in as much as you wouldn't expect Nuke and Train to really be that strong for an Envious lineup if you think of the history of the team, but they've, with this newer lineup, that's one of the things they're being able to work on. And then their weak maps, they never play Overpass. That's the do not play. That's the perma ban. And they also don't really like Cash. That's really not a map they like. And Mirage, famously not a great map for the team anyway. So Cash, Mirage, and Overpass is what they want to stay away from, and they want to get Cobble, Train, and Nuke. So first and foremost, let's look at who can get Cash, Mirage, and Overpass. I mean, no one's going to get Overpass, but who can get Cash and Mirage? Because immediately they're the teams that have some kind of a shot. Now, the format for this tournament is the first match that you play, it's a 4-team group stage, GSL style. The first match you play is best of 1, then the winners match is best of 1, and all the lower bracket matches are best of 3. Then you go into a double elim 4-team bracket where the top 2 teams from each group go, and it's a double elim, and then the winner of the upper bracket goes straight through, and the winner of the lower bracket goes straight through as well. And you also play out the last match to presumably for seeding. So I'm thinking of teams who can get Cash or Mirage against Envious. Right, well, we know that Big certainly plays Cash. We know that in terms of, let me think who else. So we're thinking of Cash and Mirage. We know that Big plays Mirage, so that already puts Big not only as a team that can contend, but they like the maps that Envious doesn't. So that gives them a shot in a best of 3 type scenario at their map. We've got to look elsewhere and see, let me see, who else have we got here? LDLC actually plays Cash. That could certainly be an equation where they could pick it. You look elsewhere, Dignitas plays Cash. Dignitas plays Mirage as well. Fnatic Academy actually plays Cash and Mirage, although I don't think that's going to matter. And Kingwin plays Mirage, but Kingwin has been, quite frankly, dreadful and not even that good on Mirage. So realistically, of those teams, you go and you look. LDLC's Cash has been good enough that they could certainly have a shot there. You go and you look at Dignitas's Mirage and Cash. Their Mirage has been very good, and they've only lost to very elite teams on that map. So that's a good chance. Watch out for Dignitas if they can take Mirage. And if they play Cash, they've had some decent results on that one. Fnatic Academy have those maps. They're strong maps for them, Cash and Mirage. The problem is their Cash has been very middling, and their Mirage, they actually have lost more than they've won, even though it's up there as one of their better maps. So that doesn't really count, I don't think, as a chance to win. And if we go to Penta, who has Mirage, their Mirage has been exceptionally good, very strong online, but admittedly they don't play the best team. So I think they'd at least have a shot if they can get to that. It's mainly Big I'm looking at. I'm mainly looking and I'm saying Big, and then Dignitas and LDLC, I think I'm more realistic to expect them to have a chance. Now, in terms of those teams, though, if they're going to beat Envious, they're going to probably have to be good on Envious's good maps. So we know Envious's good maps, Cobble, Train, Nuke. So let's look at those teams. The problem is Big is terrible on Train and Nuke. So that immediately puts them out of the equation there and makes it tough to beat Envious in a best of 3 scenario if you were to play there. Most likely you're just going to play in the best of 1. Now, Penta, they're not good at Cobble and Nuke, so that's another problem for them. Slash them off the list. We go and look at LDLC. They don't like Train, but they can play Nuke. They can play Cobble. Cobble, I admit, is in the middle of the equation. Nuke's very good for them, actually. So I think, actually, LDLC's matchups looking better in terms of the maps for them. Dignitas, Train, Cobble, Nuke are their worst maps, so you got to throw them out there. They could certainly get their map, but it's going to be tough for them to win the decider or the second map against them. Forgetting that, Fnatic Academy, Train and Nuke right are there in their worst maps. Tough for them as well. And then Cobble and Nuke, terrible for Kingwin, but I don't expect Kingwin to have any chance of getting out here. So now let's look at Big. So Big's one of the teams, if you've got Nex, a once-time, one of the very talented German players, Tapson's been pretty good against Tier 2 recently. You've got God B as an in-game leader. We know they've done some decent things at the lower level lands. You'd think, what about Big's chances to get out? So again, it's going to be really how they match up well, right? So their best maps are Inferno, Mirage, and Cash, and they want to stay away from Overpass, Train, and Nuke. And by the way, they don't have any do not play. Like in theory, they haven't played Nuke on LAN, but they do play it online. So maybe it's a do not play, but probably dependent on the opponent. So first of all, let's look who can beat them, okay? Who's going to get Overpass, Train, and Nuke against them? So first of all, LDLC, despite the fact we know Big's had some good results against LDLC in past tournaments, LDLC does play Nuke and Overpass. So that's really up the alley for LDLC to have a chance. You look at Dignitas, they play Overpass. Okay, they can get that one. You look at iGame can at least play Train. We know they're very strong on it, although you'd think in theory a team of the intelligence of Big would know to ban it against them. It's kind of they're kind of a one-trick pony there. Train's obviously a map that we know the guys from Penta play. That's a map they really like, but obviously in theory into Germany matchups, so you'd think they'd know them pretty well. Fnatic Academy plays none of those maps. Kingwin plays Train, but Kingwin's not very good at the moment, including actually they're very middling even on Train. So there's not many teams really. Really, it's like LDLC. We already know Envious, so we're leaving them out of the equation. So we really got LDLC, Dignitas on Overpass at least, iGame on Train if they were willing to play it, and Penta. So there's 4 teams that really matchup-wise can get a map against them. Now we've got to look though at the strong maps of Big and say which of these teams would have a chance on these maps. So the strong maps are Inferno, Mirage, Cash. So Inferno, Mirage, pretty good maps for Penta as well. So actually, immediately we've got to go ahead and say Penta. Inter-German matchup, and Penta's got some skill. I think they're not that far in terms of skill off them. And matchup-wise, they've got a good map pool against Big, actually. So we'll look at Penta immediately as a problem for Big. iGame has Inferno. Okay, so they've got Train, they've got Inferno. Okay, there's some not bad chances. That's really going to be dependent on what the third map is on that equation there. You look at LDLC, their big problem is Inferno and Mirage, which are 2 of the strong Big maps, are 2 of their weak maps. So immediately you're probably going to either losing 2-0, because Big's done well against them, or a third map type scenario. So LDLC, not really, more of an outsider. Dignitas, Train is actually, they have basically one of Big's weak maps, Overpass, and they have Mirage as a strong map for them, so they've got a shot in terms. That's probably a skill matchup in terms of if your Jacobs of the world and Rubino can go crazy. Fnatic Academy, their problem is they have not a really good matchup here. A good draw doesn't make sense, and the King Win 1 doesn't really matter either because, like, yeah, Cash is not in there. Inferno is a good map for them in theory. Mirage is a good map for them. So they have like an okay map pool matchup, but there's not a very good team right now. So really, you're looking at like Penta and an outside shot for LDLC, and then iGame just if Big's willing to play into their hands and kind of be a bit coy with the map veto. So Big most likely should make it through. They have a couple of teams can challenge them. Beyond Big, you got to look, for example, okay, so Penta. The interesting part for Penta is I think they have chances against some of the bigger teams, but the real question for them is, since they're strong on maps like Inferno Train, when they play iGame, are they actually just going to let iGame play Trainer? They're going to say that'll be one of the maps, you can pick it and we'll play Inferno, because that could be a good chance to 2-0, but the problem is no one really should be giving iGame Train. That's just a map that's they're like unusually good on in contrast to the other maps, so why would you waste your time giving it to them, you know? In that equation, you just want to stay away from it. Now, I think a positive is that in general, Penta doesn't really play Nuke, so you'd think they'd just ban Nuke against iGame, one of the better iGame maps. So I think actually they can get, the map pool will be good for iGame if they play Penta, but the difference is it's good all the way around for Penta, so that actually should be a good matchup. LDLC against someone like Penta, not bad. They play Nuke and Overpass, which are maps that Penta doesn't really want. Cobbles in the middle. LDLC actually has a good map pool matchup there. That's going to be an interesting one, Penta versus LDLC. I think they're two of the teams that are probably contending for like the third slot in this qualifier. You look at Fnatic Academy, they can play some of the maps that are in the middle of the pool for Penta, and in terms of the weak maps, they can play actually Nuke and Overpass, which are Penta's weaker maps. So really, they've got to probably win on something like Overpass there. I think it's going to be tough for Fnatic Academy, actually. I think Penta's probably still a better team than them. Dignitas, as I mentioned, they've got Overpass, which they can certainly play against them. They already like to play Mirage. Cash is in the middle. So Dignitas, Penta, probably edge it to Penta, but that's not that far off. Dignitas has their chances. King Win, who really cares again? That's not really that important. So realistically, I think to me, it's going to be Envious and Big, and then Penta's like an outside shot at beating both, but then it's Penta, LDLC, depending on which opponent you're talking about, who are probably competing for third slot and therefore chance to play the lower bracket final against one of these teams. Dignitas, outside chance in terms of skill, have had some good results. If they can get Mirage against anyone, they certainly have a good shot on that map. Overpass, they're not bad on. They have a couple of maps. The problem is they have a lot that aren't that strong. The map pool isn't that deep. Like, actually, ultimately, you look at a team like Penta, they've got a much deeper map pool. iGame's even had a decent one. LDLC at least loses to good teams on their maps. So I actually think now what we're going to do is we're going to go and we're going to look at, let me just see if I can get this to work. Let's see. Right, what we're going to do is we're going to go on the ESP website and let me see. I'm just going to put this up here. We're going to put, let's put my camera on. We're going to go ahead and look at this. Technology is not my strongest suit. So I'll just go down here. And what we're going to do is we're going to look on this site at who I'm going to pick, because I'm actually going to do my pool myself now. So I'm going to click on the Thorin exclusive launch pool, which is for the PGL Minor. Still 2 days left on it. I'm going to enter it now. Right, so I'm going to add my place. So it's very similar to an old site that I used to work with. So you have $10,000 salary initially. Average salary left per player is $2,000 at the moment because I haven't picked any. Now I'm going to try and pick who I want right now. So remember, the teams I expect to do very well is Envious right out the gate. So I'll probably want a big hitter from Envious, right? So let's go ahead and let's look at Envious here. So Envious has got Happy, always good for stats. Obviously plays a very bait-heavy style. Scream, fantastic for stats. And actually, I think against this level of opponent, it should be very good. But obviously, Scream is very expensive. So actually, if we go ahead and click on how expensive players are, I'll do it the other way around. Obviously, Scream is the most expensive player, and with good reason. So is Nex as well. Now, the problem with these sorts of fantasy things is oftentimes you don't want to go for just try and get like both these players and have crap players. You want to pick the players in terms of cheap players that are going to do well, but they're going to be cheap to round it out. So I actually personally, I'm going to skip Nex. Nex dominates against second level opponents, but I think actually Tabson for the money right here is a very good pickup. So I'm going to add Tabson straight away. I feel like he's had some very strong performances recently against lower level competition. I don't really buy that he's going to be an elite level player, but certainly this level of opponent you'd expect him to be good against. I'm not really a believer in Kiev myself, so I think he's fairly average. I think Nex actually is incredible against tier 2, and he certainly could dominate here, but he's just the cost. I don't think it's worth it versus Tabson. I'm going to take Scream as well. Well, actually, should I? Because Scream is very expensive, but Happy's actually... I think I'll go ahead and take Happy, actually. I think Happy's pretty solid to get his numbers here. I think his team's going to do well. Matches might not be that drawn out, so you might say that Scream's better, but Scream's more expensive. So I'm going to try these two for right now. Now, I want to get some players in the middle right now, because obviously average salary I left over is 1,500, because I bought some expensive players. So I probably want to go and get some players who are more in the middle. So I think Kingwin is going to do terribly, so it doesn't matter that Kimishu's a player that has good numbers in general. I think in terms of Penta, there's some good players there that I could go and get, because I think Penta have an outside shot, actually. I've already got a big and an envious player. So let me see. I'll go ahead and I'll choose the Penta players. Where are they? There we go. So of Penta, you have to realise, to me, the best player is Sonny. I actually think that guy has a lot of potential going forwards in the future. Innocent, we know that guy in the past from the old ESC lineups. And later on they were, let me see, what were they? They weren't Vexed, it was the other lineup. So, because that's basically the Kingwin lineup. So who would they have been back then? Let me think. Because they played at E-League Road to the Major. Were they Kingwin at the time? Maybe they were, actually. So I've always thought Innocent was a pretty solid player. I think Sonny's pretty good. I think actually, I mean, the problem is Sonny's fairly expensive there. I don't know, actually. Innocent is quite cheap, but he has pretty good. And also online, his numbers are pretty good, but that's not that cheap, though, in person. Right, let me see. Because if I add Tabson, maybe I'll take out Happy, actually. Maybe I'll get rid of Happy here. How does one do that? Don't really understand how you remove players. That's my only problem. Can you not remove players? Maybe I have to go back again. Right, there we go. I'll start from the beginning again so I can actually get it right this time. So actually, I think what I'll do is I'll add Tabson. So let's go to big. Let's add Tabson here. Let's add Sonny, because I think Sonny's going to do well. Is he going to do... Let's see, though, because is he going to do better than Happy, who's... I think he's going to play a lot of matches, actually. I think he's going to play a lot in the upper bracket and lower bracket. So, yeah, I'm going to take Sonny for that one. Right, beyond that, I haven't got much salary left, so I've got to go with cheap players now. So now we've got to pick the ones that are cheap to round it out. Right, now, who actually has a chance to do well here? I think Twanu is actually probably a steal for that match, actually. I think he's somebody you could definitely rely on. Obviously, he's the AWPer. He's going to be in position to get kills, you would think. I actually think I'll go ahead and take him. Now, I've got 3,000. I haven't got much left, though, to pick these last players. So maybe I chose two expensive players here. Maybe I have to kick one of those guys. Let's see. Because for my game, I still feel like I want a player from there, because I feel like they actually have a chance to do something just in terms of the players. Like for my game, Juho is the obvious one. He used to be on Ents. Zori's the AWPer. I mean, actually, that guy Zen from Penta used to be on iGame a while back, if you remember when they beat Tai Lu at that WCA tournament in China. So I mainly want Juho and Zori. So whereabouts is Juho, actually? Let's see how much he is. 2,200. Can I take anyone for 900? Is there anyone even costs that much? HS from Penta. Is that a good enough team? Let me see. Still got $300 left. Or should I change one player? Let me see. Tabson, Sonny, Twanu. I actually think that's a decent enough team. Like Twanu, I think is one of the better players on that team on LDLC. I think he's a steal for that much, because I think actually at this tournament they match up pretty well. But crucially, I don't think they're going to win the tournament. So as a result, I think they're going to play a lot of best of threes. He's going to have a lot of chances to get his stats. I think Sonny can be an MVP of this tournament. I've got Tabson. He can be an MVP of this tournament. HS, not a great player, admittedly, but I'm just picking him for cheap. I think Juho actually can be the surprise one who can do a lot there. So yeah, that's going to be my team. I'm going to go ahead. Why can't I submit my picks there? I have to remove a player then, presumably. Salary left 300. Do you have to... Wait a second. How does that work? How many... Oh, you have to pick a tiebreaker. How many seconds will have passed until the first kill in the last map of the entire tournament? Go ahead and say 22, shall we? Right. There we go. I've entered, as far as I can tell. Yes, there we go. I've entered into it. And I could share my picks. So... that's a brief breakdown of who I think is going to do well there. In terms of other players who you could pick, here's who I would go down and say. I would say, first of all, for Envious, I think Scream is obviously the best player on the team, but he's expensive. So if you pick him, you've got to really think he's going to be the MVP of the tournament to make your team work. Obviously, RPK is an okay, stable guy. Personally, I wouldn't put stock in what happened to him at EPL, where he did super duper well. I would say Happy's actually the better pick in terms of just to get his numbers because of his style of play. And if Envious wins, his style of play works. XMS is a very skilled player, but for fantasy, I don't know, because he's more on the entry side of the equation. So they tend to die a lot there. So they're getting deaths as well as kills. And those sorts of players in general who even out like that actually aren't that great for fantasy. In terms of big, yes, Tabson's very strong. He's a pretty solid pick. Next could go ballistic. So if you're really confident in big to do well, you can go ahead and take Nex. I personally would stay away from Kiev and any of the others in that team. I think Legia and Gobi are terrible for fragging. Penta, yeah, like I said, Sonny is my main pick. Innocent and Zen aren't bad either. Zen actually could be a very good value pick later on if you want to go for that equation. I think in terms of... let me think who else. Okay, iGame, like I said, either you take Juho like I did, or if you want to go with an AWPer, go with Zori. He's probably quite cheap. He's going to be one of the lesser players. Or, what's it, X7 or whatever that guy is. He's not terrible. He's an okay enough player to go with. In terms of Fnatic Academy, I would personally stay away from them. I would only put their players in there if you just want to put in one for more cheap, because I don't think their team's going to do well. But the best player on that team was that guy Jaywalking Z, right? Remember when he was on that team Crowns before, where he actually smashed Echo Fox with Sean Gares last year at the ESEA. It was like 22 or 23 season. He did pretty well there. Golden's not bad, but again, I'm staying away from Fnatic Academy's players personally. And if you want to go for Kingwin, if you're just Polish, I guess... I mean, if I was Polish, I'd go for Innocent myself and Penta. But if you're just crazy, because I don't think Kingwin's going to do well. Yes, classically the best player is Mishu. And on a field like this, he could do well. Mouse actually has been pretty decent. Not to be confused with the German team, obviously. Not very German at the moment. But he's actually been decent enough. And Spero's always been all right in those teams. But he's an AWPer, and it's tough to get kills as an AWPer. That's why I had to pick Twan, who was a cheaper player, and he wasn't really top of the scoreboards. So in general, that's how I see it coming. I think Envious is going to get out. I think probably big, but an outside chance for Penta. Penta has good matchups against most teams. And LDLC has a good matchup, I think, against Big and against Penta, though probably not realistically against Envious. So it's really going to be Envious and whoever gets out of those three for my money. And I'll actually be at the PGL EU Minor, along with Yanko, along with Red Eye.
I'm Device from Australis, and welcome to Thorin's YouTube channel. It's a choke-free zone.
What's up guys, this is Jordan Nothing Gilbert.